This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nashvillager Podcast. It's May 5th, 2026, and it's Election Day in Tennessee. Local Election Day. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. Local elections can really get caught in the shuffle. They don't happen at the same times as federal or statewide elections, so it's easy to be confused about the dates. And even with the campaign signs that pop up here, there, and everywhere, it can be kind of a blur. Who's running? For what offices? And what those offices do? How many people could really tell you? To make an informed choice at the ballot box in a local election, or even to be informed enough to know it's time to show up, can require a little bit of homework. So here's a little bit about what's going on right now, at least enough to get you started. Today is for local primaries. Now, it used to be rare for local elections here to be partisan. The norm had been for people to run without announcing their party affiliation, and voters would just pick from the whole slate at a general election. But in recent years, primaries have become more common, as far down the ballot as the races for school board elections. In most communities, the ballots will include a number of judicial positions, various kinds of judges, court clerks, public defenders, sheriff. Most counties that are having a primary do include those school board seats this time around. Pretty much everything up for grabs this time, and Davidson County falls into one of those buckets. And we've had newscast coverage from WPLN reporters Cynthia Abrams and Camelia Burris that can tell you a little more about those races. In many counties around the mid-state, including some of the biggest outside of Nashville, it's also time to pick a county mayor and county commissioners. That's true in Williamson, Rutherford, and Wilson counties. Lebanon voters may notice some differences on their ballot. That city's special school district reorganized its board, and rather than 3 at-large members, it's now made up of 5 seats, each assigned to a specific zone. Wherever you are in the state, whatever is on your ballot, if you go to vote today, there will be one big difference. Because it's a primary, you have to pick which party's slate you'll be picking out, right? And in the past, you've just had to indicate one or the other and sign that, yes, I want to vote on the Democratic ballot, or yes, I am choosing the Republican primary. Well, this time, you'll have to sign a statement of allegiance to the party whose primary you picked. The state's elections coordinator added that language back in October. It's the latest attempt to align the actual practice on primary day with a long-standing state law that says primaries are reserved for bona fide party members. But as we've pointed out many times in WPLN's past coverage, there's no real definition of what that actually means. Not in Tennessee law, anyway. Voters don't register party affiliation in this state. It's just something you self-declare every time you vote in a primary. And there's nothing to stop you from opting for a different party this time around from the one whose primary you voted in last time. If you do it to game the system, that's called crossover voting, and it's illegal. But the action you take at the polling place is exactly the same as if you do it because of a legitimate shift in opinion. That's just called changing your mind, and it's perfectly allowable under the law. 2 years ago, one East Tennessee Republican who lost his re-election primary challenged the results by claiming he was the victim of crossover voting, the illegal one. He appealed to the state party, but they decided everything was on the up and up. To prove his case, he probably would have had to show that specific voters were flagged as illegally participating in the wrong party's primary. But that's a very high bar. It takes the agreement of 3 poll workers to challenge someone's primary party choice. And you'd have to be pretty vocal about your primary affiliation for them to determine the ballot you asked for doesn't match your closely held convictions. There's also the other tricky little bit of business in Tennessee politics these days. For a lot of offices, it's the only time you get to choose between 2 candidates. In solidly red counties, seats may have 2 or 3 Republican candidates with the Democratic ballot completely blank. There are seats in Nashville where that situation is reversed. If you tend to agree with a minority party and there's nobody from that party running, then the only way to have a voice in the election is to ask for the other party's primary ballot. So, does that make you a crossover voter? Or is it fair to say that, given the situation, you've been forced to be a de facto member of the party that is actually holding an election and take that majority party ballot? To a certain point, it comes down to your own moral compass. An article in the Knoxville News Sentinel summed it up this way. If you can honestly say, I want to participate in this party's primary and support its candidates this time, You fit the description required by state law. And let's be very, very clear. The language of the affidavit you sign when you request a ballot has changed, but the law has not. If you have previously voted in primary elections in Tennessee, the actual law governing who can participate is the same now as it has been in every other election cycle for the past half century. But bottom line, the voting portion of this year's election cycle starts today in the Tennessee counties that do hold primaries. It does take a little more effort to decide who you want to vote for, and turnout does tend to be pretty low for these primaries or for local elections as a whole. People don't pay as much attention to these smaller races as they do to who's running for Congress or governor or president. But as I've watched our elections closely through my career, and as I've watched the way our government works, the lesson I was once taught by a civics teacher has been proven true time and time again. And that is this: there is no more effective way to have your say in how things work than by voting in local elections. That's partly because your one vote is part of a smaller total, but more than that. And more importantly, tomorrow's candidates for state or federal office are gaining credibility by winning local positions today. This is the start of the pipeline. And when something big goes on and the folks in D.C. or the State House want to understand how our community is impacted, they're probably not going to speak to you. They're going to pick up the phone and call the people who win these elections. And the positions on today's ballot have more influence on your daily life than the public often realizes. They're the folks who change the zoning rules on your street or who set the guidelines for how things work in your kid's school. If you end up in court, these are the judges who will oversee your case and the clerks who make the process run smoothly. As Sesame Street once put it, these are the people in your neighborhood. And today you have a chance to make an impact on how your neighborhood works. In just a few minutes, a Curious Nashville report on buried treasure. That's coming up after the newscast.
Tennessee lawmakers are back at the Capitol this week to consider new congressional maps to eliminate the state's lone Democratic seat in Congress. I'm Mariana Bacallao, and you can find live updates on this special session online at WPLN.org.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. Tennessee is one of a few Republican-led states rushing to draw new congressional maps before the midterms this fall. WPLN's Mariana Bacallao reports lawmakers are meeting in Nashville today to consider dividing Memphis's Democratic stronghold.
U.S. Senator and gubernatorial candidate Marsha Blackburn has cheered on the special session.
It is time for us to cement President Trump's agenda.
The last-minute redistricting effort was spurred by a U.S. Supreme Court case that undid protections for majority black districts like Memphis.
Mid-decade redistricting is new, but attempts to take away the voting rights of black people is not new.
That's Democratic Representative Justin J. Pearson of Memphis. He points to the historical obstacles black voters have faced, from physical violence to Jim Crow-era laws that kept black voters from casting a ballot. Pearson is running against incumbent U.S. Representative Steve Cohen, who has asked lawmakers not to adopt new maps. Here he is outside the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, where Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated.
They don't have to do it, but they're getting immense amount of pressure from the White House. That's where it's coming from. Donald Trump wants an extra seat.
Some Republicans are hesitant, citing Tennessee code that bans mid-decade redistricting. Some have asked for their constituents to weigh in. Since the filing deadline has already passed for the midterm elections, the legislature would have to come up with a new election timeline along with new maps. That could mean candidates like Pearson and Cohen would have to refile before early voting starts in July. Mariana Bacallao, WPLN News.
Nashville's mayor has unveiled the proposed city budget for the upcoming fiscal year. WPLN Cynthia Abrams reports, like last year, the total is $3.8 billion.
Year to year, city spending typically grows. Last year, a property tax increase made a big change. But this is the first year under Mayor Freddie O'Connell that the budget is completely stagnant. One reason for that is a proposal to slightly reduce the grocery tax by a half cent. Another reason? The city's incoming tax revenues are simply flat. But this budget is merely a proposal. Typically, Metro Council members make adjustments, which they must agree upon by the end of June. Otherwise, the mayor's budget will take effect. Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
Community members can weigh in on changes they'd like to see in the budget at the Metro Council meeting on June 2nd. A West Tennessee school district expects to lay off up to 75 employees this summer, according to a filing with the state labor department. Fayette County Public Schools is headquartered in Summerville in the eastern outskirts of Memphis. In an email to WPLN, the district's superintendent stressed that 75 layoffs are, quote, the maximum potential impact based on what we know right now, but it does not mean that 75 employees will lose their jobs. Late last year, the Tennessee Lookout reported that Fayette County Public Schools had considered cutting staff over budget concerns. The district has also faced legal challenges and scrutiny over alleged racial discrimination. If you're in Clarksville this week and notice something that seems like a battle happening in the distance, don't be alarmed. Starting today, Fort Campbell is conducting a 3-day training exercise that officials say will span the entire post. That means increased gunfire, explosions, even smoke. There will be an uptick in the number of vehicles and aircraft moving around the area. People could also hear simulated emergency announcements over the loudspeakers. Outdoor concert season is here. Ascend Amphitheater kicked off their season this past weekend and will host David Byrne on Saturday. The theater is under new management, Opry Entertainment Group. Music and culture reporter Justin Barney says they fixed a pesky problem that was bugging pedestrians and bikers around Ascend for years.
The problem was that there was no way through the park during shows. Since the downtown greenway is technically on the grounds of Ascend, you'd have to have a ticket to be there. So Live Nation, who ran the amphitheater for the past 10 years, just closed that section during events, leading pedestrians and bikers to have to go all the way around. Opry Entertainment VP of Design and Construction, Sean Flippin, saw a simple solution.
We came up with the idea, why not reconnect the greenway with a bridge? And so that's what we did.
So now there's a new wooden bridge going over that land. And it will be open during concerts. And if you're thinking the bridge sounds like a great way to see a show for free, you're not wrong. But you will be stopped. Since Metro owns the land and leases it to Opry, Downtown Parks and Rec and MPD will be there patrolling during shows. Justin Barney, Nashville Public Radio.
If you live and work in Davidson County, it's likely you've had to brave the horde of cowboy boots on Broadway or the sweltering July heat waves. But one unavoidable task is visiting the county clerk's office. It could be for a license plate renewal, or marriage license, or business license. Brenda Wynn is the outgoing Davidson County clerk. She's held the position since 2012 and will be retiring at the end of August. She was our guest yesterday for a profile edition of This is Nashville, where she talked about what kind of person it will take to fill her shoes.
You need to make sure you've got somebody there who has the temperament to do this job, who has the vision to do this job, and who has the desire to want to do this job and do it well.
3 Democratic candidates are running in today's primary to fill County Clerk Wynn's position. That race is unopposed, so whichever Democrat wins today gets the job. You can hear the full show with Brenda Wynn in the This is Nashville podcast feed. Well, Dolly Parton says she has good news and bad news. The bad news is she has had to cancel a scheduled 6-show residency in Las Vegas over health concerns. The good news, she says in an Instagram video, is that everything is treatable. The country icon didn't give a lot of details on her condition, except to say she's responding well to meds and treatment, but that they make her feel a bit too swimmy-headed to handle a banjo while wearing 5-inch heels. Get well soon, Dolly.
You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org.
It's time again for Curious Nashville, our series that answers your questions about Middle Tennessee. Our latest endeavor has to do with backyard buried treasures. A listener asked why their hound dog kept digging up items in the backyard, and it made them wonder, were people intentionally burying their trash? While exploring this question, WPLN's Tasha A.F. Lemley interviewed a dozen Nashvillians about all the things they've found. In this non-narrated postcard, we find just how fascinated people can be about their discoveries.
Oh, a little sheep. What else is in here? A lot of little tops. This is just a piece of rubber. Ooh, that's kind of cute. Another bottle. Yeah. Ooh, that's an old bottle. A hinge, door hinge. I bet you I got the best stuff, huh?
Ink bottles underneath the church that had been tossed under there. in one that's a men's hair oil bottle to lay down their wild cowlick or whatever. And those are all Civil War vintage, so it goes back to that period when the building was in use as a hospital, and the ink would have been used by the doctors for reports on how the patients were doing, and maybe even a patient's last letter home to their family.
We found this one bottle that was clearly very old, and it had some writing on it. Jerome S. Sand Pharmacy on Union Street.
Little glass vials. One's blue and one's brown, and they're probably old medicine vials, is from what I can tell.
The spade hit what I assumed was just a large rock. So I started clearing soil out from around it, and then realized that the tree was going through the metal wheel hub of a car.
I noticed a rubber hose that was sticking above the ground a little bit, and I decided to try and dig it out. I continued to dig and eventually uncovered an engine and an entire transmission system for a boat that was buried in the backyard.
Along with that windshield came an alternator. It just giveth. It was like the spring of car parts. It's like, okay, here's another car part. Here's another. It was an archaeological find of old car parts.
You had to tear up the entire yard to get it loose enough to even pry this fabric out of the ground. And after probably 2 hours of digging and chipping and hacking at roots with a shovel, finally managed to get one whole cushion up.
I dug up a gravestone, this huge thing that's like 2 by 4 feet. It was in the roots of a tree when I decided to put in a fence in the backyard.
A giant piece of what looked like a jawbone, and we were like, oh my gosh, that's wild. And then we started digging up more stuff and more bones, and then like bone saws and stuff, and we're like, okay.
And I dug up one of those old-fashioned satellite discs, the big old ugly thing. It was in the yard. I asked a friend that had a truck, I said, is there any way we can pull this up out of the yard? So we hitched some chains and pulled it with his truck. I mean, I find those regular things, the kids' toys, marbles maybe, but, you know, the satellite was the craziest thing I ever pulled out of the yard.
I found other toys, balls, and teddy bears and stuff, but definitely the creepy doll with the dead eyes and the Barbie with the chewed off arms are at the top of the list of absolute nightmare fuel.
All right, I got to admit those anecdotes have me thinking about things that I have dug up in my own yard. I think what takes the cake? An entire sweatshirt. Well, what we heard is just one piece of the story. You can hear more from a metal detectorist and an archaeologist by searching for the full episode in the Curious Nashville podcast feed. And we do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. And thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. A little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.